Thad Brown, Carl Jones here with you on BKL Nightly. This is the Let's Talk Ball edition. We are breaking down the X's and the O's as we do every single week. We're going over the All-22 film, talking Bills and Saints. You know, a game that, Carl, we talked about is one, the Bills were favored by 15, 16 points, whatever it was, and didn't play like a team that was that much of a favorite. We talked on Monday and Tuesday about, hey, look, this is the NFL. You know, you can't expect the Bills to be like this all the time. And when you go through the film, I think this was one where we kind of reflected that impression. There was some good stuff, but there was some not so good stuff. I do want to start, though, with the thing that was as good as I think I've ever seen when it comes to, you know, a Bills player on offense. And for once, we ain't talking about number 17. Carl, James Cook, man, and I don't throw this comparison around lightly, but right now, or at least in this game, he reminded me a lot of LaShawn McCoy when it comes to his ability to make things up on his own.
He's playing at that elite level right now. I think last year it would be, being unbiased, I think he was a back half, top 10 type of running back. I think that considering the fact that he only played half of the snaps, he wasn't on the field on third down, he got to 1,000 yards on the final game of the year. I think it's safe to say he was in that stratosphere of running back. It would be hard pressed to leave him outside of the top 5 in terms of how he's playing today. Like just on September 30th, there aren't 5 backs who are playing the position better than James Cook. He has the most yards in between the tackles in all of the National Football League. Imagine saying that when they drafted him a few years back. Like, hey, James Cook is going to be this guy who you want to run right down Broadway. The fact that he's developed an insane contact balance and his ability to field blocks and read them and turn a 5-yard gain into 12 and 13, that is superb to watch. And he gets better every year. He's adding nooks and crannies to his game. And this year, I think it's that vision that's turning his game to another level.
The thing I like the most in this game, you talk about turning the 5s into 12s. We've seen that a lot. In this game, I saw a couple of times where he turned 0s and 1s into 5s and 7s. And that was the LaShawn McCoy staple because LaShawn McCoy never ran behind a line like the Bills have right now. He was a guy that had to figure out, okay, I'm going to get 0.02 before contact. How do I make this work? And Cook has reached that level now, too, where there are, you know, weekly now, multiple plays where he is adding yards on his own, navigating through, you know, poor blocking, good defense. And you don't get much of the poor blocking part either. Credit to the Bills' offensive line there. But, you know, again, I think he's at a level. Let's play the game right now. Who's better in the end? Who would you say, if we're going to rank, let's rank them, all right? Let's actually play this out. I'm going to go Saquon and Jonathan Taylor, and I don't know if I get any further. Like, Derrick Henry right this second is not better than James Cook.
Bijan Robinson is better, too.
Yes, that's the one. I go there, too.
I will say Jahmyr Gibbs as well, but then somebody will say the argument, well, he splits carries. I'm fairly confident in saying James Cook
I go with Gibbs.
Will split carries with David Montgomery. But even though I think Saquon Barkley is a phenomenal back, at this very second, the Eagles' offensive line is struggling. So Saquon Barkley is averaging like 3-point yards a pop. I think he's a better player than James Cook. Do not get it twisted. But in terms of what they put on tape the first 4 weeks of the season, James Cook has put on a better performance. But yes, I think we would all take Saquon Barkley over James Cook. But that's the company we're talking about, though. The fact that we're putting him next to these names, these Pro Bowlers, these all-pro caliber players, says a lot about where he's taking his game, even from the last time we saw him in January.
All right, I'm going to call up a list of other running backs just to see if we're missing anybody, but I feel pretty good with saying he's in the top 5. The other part of the James Cook discussion, and you know, Joe Brady brought it up in terms of usage in his press conference on Monday, that Cook last 2 games, 66% of the snaps, 73% of the snaps. Those 2 are career highs for him. Now, he's had other games where he's had more total snaps, but percentage, that was the most he's ever had. It's coming at the expense of mostly Ray Davis. But, you know, Carl, you and I don't think have any problem with where the Bills are going with usage when it comes to James Cook.
So for those who don't know, I think it's relatively common knowledge at this point that your running game baseline is because of your offensive line. Like, the Eagles' offensive line and the running game has been superb for years because of the big fellas up front. Saquon Barkley just took it to nuclear levels. So I think at a bare minimum, this Bills rushing attack will be good because they have a really, really good unit up front. But James Cook takes it to elite status. And for however you think of Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, they aren't James Cook. So when you are an offensive coordinator or a play caller, you are knowingly taking your rushing attack from top 2 in the NFL to 10th or 11th every single time you take James Cook off the field. It's the same problem that the Philadelphia Eagles have with Saquon Barkley, the Ravens have with Derrick Henry, and I can go down the list of the guys we just named. You are knowingly making your rushing attack worse, And the conversation with those guys is that, oh, they're 220, 230 pounds. They can take it. Well, the Bills are in a problem, the same issue, except James Cook is a buck 95, 200, soaking wet if he got bricks around his feet. I understand those concerns, but that rushing attack looks like the Eagles last year. It is hard to knowingly say, hey, we're going to take this from historic levels to just merely good.
The other part of it, too, is it's not like James Cook has some injury history that says for sure if you run him between the tackles, he's going to have a problem. You know, we just are concerned because of, like you said, the numbers on the scale don't begin with a 2. And look, that's still a legitimate concern. And yes, if you pound James Cook, it might cost you later in the season. But for now, with the way he's playing, and you're 100% right, with the impact he has on the run game, I'm going to be happy to run him out there until I find some reason to prove otherwise that he shouldn't be in this game on a regular basis. I do worry, and real quick, Carl, give me your take on this. You know, Ray Davis last year had a nice start. I think there's a lot of confidence with him as a backup running back. What do you think the impact is on a guy like that now that he is essentially a backup and not a guy more involved in a rotation?
Ray Davis's problem is that James Cook has really elevated as a player who is best used in between the tackles. And I think when you drafted Ray Davis out of Kentucky, yes, he was a player who was really good out of the backfield, but he was a bruiser, a thumper, right? Some of those guys who can get those tough 3 and 4 yard gains. Well, James Cook is great at that. So for you to sit here and tell me what Ray Davis does better than James Cook, okay, he's a better pass protector. Well, Ty Johnson's better than all of them, and he plays above Ray Davis in that department. So it's hard to justify snaps for Ray Davis that don't come at the expense of making the Bills' offense worse. I think that's the problem and the conundrum that Joe Brady's going to have to battle with the rest of the season.
All right, we did forget one running back who I think we probably should put above James Cook, and that would be Christian McCaffrey. Do we agree with that or no?
Yeah, I forgot about my boy CMC. Yes, he's a baller.
I'll throw a few more names at you. Just go quick. Yes, no. Yes is better than Cook. No, not better than Cook. But guys who I think at least are in the conversation. Kyron Williams?
No.
I agree. Josh Jacobs?
Equal, because they do different things. But James Cook is playing better today.
Yeah, I'm with you on the take. I would still go with James Cook. That's probably it. So we got James Cook, borderline top 5, which feels, to be honest, it feels low as good as he's playing. But when you start going through the names, I think that's 100% fair. All right, let's move on. Up front, the Bills had to play a game without their regular starting offensive line. I'm surprised they even bothered to play the game. You know, those are things that apparently don't happen anymore, but Spencer Brown missed the game with a calf injury. I thought Ryan Vandermark was fine. Look, this is a guy that every time he gets in the game, I feel like he can play in the NFL on a regular basis. Is he as good as Spencer Brown? No, but there might be 3 of those guys in the NFL who are as good as Spencer Brown. Though you did say, and I agree with you here, the right side of the offensive line, it wasn't their best day at the office.
No, and the other person on that side of the offensive line is Osiris Torrance, who I think is ascending into a really good guard, but he's at his best a mauler when he puts his 2 hands on you. He can really move you. And the Saints had some guys up front, most notably Carl Granderson, that's more of a speed guy. And when those rush situations kind of, I don't want to say expose Osiris Torrance, but gave him some fits in certain situations. So I thought those 2 guys on the right side didn't have their best day at the office. But what's funny in saying all that, they didn't have their best day at the office, and it was still like a top 10 day when you look at the rest of the National Football League. We've talked about this off camera. I just want people to just understand how great this Bills infrastructure is up front. There are some units across the NFL that aren't, I want to be polite here when I say this, that aren't conducive to offensive success. I don't care who you have back there. You just aren't going to have down-to-down success. The Bills aren't one of those teams. So despite a backup in Ryan Vandermark, Osiris Torrance didn't have his best day, the Bills still were able to function as an NFL offense.
I'll say it for you in the PG version. There are a lot of bleep ups out there. That's what it is. Right? A lot of offense that have a bunch of bleep ups on there. To your point, though, look, the 4th down play to Shakir that everybody complained about, and I get the argument about not using Cook there, that was simply Osiris Torrance took a wrong step, trips up Ryan Vandermark pulling, and the play is dead. That wasn't necessarily a bad play. It was just something that happened in a game. But it happened so little with the Bills, you circle it with red pen, and you're like, oh, my goodness, what is this that happened in the game? So, yeah, I'm with you. With Joe Brady, I want to get into this a little bit. Number one, look, I am now officially out on the Joe Brady, I'm going to run the same play 3 times in a row because I can thing. It got to the point early in the second half, actually the start of the second half, he runs the same run play 3 times in a row. On the second snap, before the Bills run the play, I'm looking at the formation and thinking, oh, I know what's coming up here. It's the same thing I just saw on the last snap. It wasn't just me, because both Saints linebackers are in the hole where the play is going to go, to the point where they kind of blocked themselves by being in the same spot, and the Bills still ran it well. Then they ran it again on a third time in a row. This time, New Orleans figured out how to play it. The reason I have a problem is that third time. Carl, there are too many times when Joe Brady goes the same play, the same play, the same play, but at the end, he ends up with the team in second and long. Now, look, you can get away with that because you're Josh Allen, but at some point, and we've seen multiple times the last few games, where those second and longs turn into punts or turn into drive enders. And look, I like going to it once or twice in a row, but when we start spamming these plays over and over, teams have seen it, teams know it's coming, and teams are going to be able to stop it, not just keep it from going for 15, but causing Buffalo problems at the other end.
Yeah, defensive players get paid too. They watch film just like the rest of us, more attentively than us, to be quite frank. So they're going to pick up on some of those nooks and crannies. I will say about the whole Joe Brady experience, and I'm not going to talk out both sides of my mouth here, in that yes, the Bills' offense is still elite. Once again, look across the rest of the National Football League. There are some units that are struggling. The Eagles put up 55 points in the NFC Championship game right now, and Lord have mercy, everyone's mad about A.J. Brown not getting the rock. The Bills are fine, but I will say they feel a little vanilla, like they feel a little safe. And I'm not going to speculate on why that's the case. Maybe that's the schedule. Maybe it's early in the season. They just want to work on the foundation of their offense. Whatever the reason is, this doesn't feel like the full fleshed out version of the Joe Brady experience. And I wonder, as we go further along, will they start to diversify things up a little bit?
I'm thinking that we better hope it's not, because I think there's going to need to be more. And the other part of it too is, and I was thinking about this, when you have James Cook playing at the level we talked about, and Josh Allen is already at the MVP level, and the offensive line is 1 or 2 or 3 in the NFL, there's no knock on Joe Brady, who's been fine, but how many of 32 current offensive coordinators would succeed in that spot? The number is absolutely in the high 20s at minimum, so, to say, look at what Joe Brady's doing. Yeah, there's good things he's doing, but the margin of error is enormously wide, and then
Yes.
A stupid thing I want to complain about, when Joe Brady on Monday talked about he thought the Saints were the best defense the Bills have played so far. He might be right, but the 4 teams the Bills have played so far, last time I checked, literally, we're in the bottom 7 in EPA per play allowed. So there has not been a good, it's like telling me what's the most realistic Transformers movie. Like, sure, it might be that, but come on, Joe. I mean, look, the Bills are going to get tested a whole lot more, and Joe Brady for that matter, as we go forward. All right, let's flip to the defensive side of the ball. The number one star after the game, the number one story probably was Cole Bishop. And I think we both thought that the interception was the highlight play, but there was more good to mine there from that film for number 24.
He's playing faster, and I think that when you go back to what Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbitt said in the beginning of the season and dating back to the offseason, he just needed more reps. He needed more time on task, or he felt more comfortable out there in the offense. And I think he's playing faster. I think he's playing more assertive. There was a play, I can't recall exactly when, but he was the deep middle safety, and a run bust down the Bills sideline, and he ran like a bat trying to get his prey, and was right there and made a nice, beautiful tackle in the open field. That is the hardest play to make for a deep middle field safety, is tackling in space, and he did it relatively easy. That's a player who's just more comfortable and confident. And there were some other plays outside of that one. Obviously, the interception was amazing. He was the only player who really snuffed it out. Trey White fell off of his player late, but I don't think he would have made a play on that ball. He was the only player that really figured that the trick play was up, so I just want to give him his kudos for that. Yes, he did have the rough play on Brandon Cooks, where Brandon Cook, or if it was a better ball, Brandon Cook scores a touchdown. I'm not saying I think he's some all-pro, all-world safety, but it is good to see a young player looking more comfortable and confident out there. I tweeted this out. Instincts plus athleticism equals big plays. You saw that with the play at the goal line. You're hopeful that, because he's one of the few players that has great athleticism, at least for their position on this defense. You're hopeful that with the instincts improving a little bit, that he's able to produce more splash plays for the Bills.
I'll give you another instinct play. The Saints ran a jet sweep with Shaheed twice. On the second time, Bishop was on the line of scrimmage, drove his tight end, his blocker back, and basically ended the play by, forcing penetration. That was a confident instinct play to me. He also had a really good one-on-one rep coverage with Juwan Johnson, who's a monster of a player, and to be able to hang with him physically to the point where I really thought a penalty should have been called, but regardless, it was a really good rep. So I think we're seeing, it's not just that splash play. We're seeing more and more indications indications that he's feeling good and comfortable, which is a big step for him. He wasn't the only safety I liked in this game too, at least on one play. The play before the interception, Taylor Rapp did a nice job of signaling to Trey White that he was going to basically push outside and pick up a receiver who was going in motion against Shaheed on a play where the Saints were trying to mesh or wall off everyone inside to let Shaheed leak out to the other side. Carl, as someone who's been in a secondary like that, the thing that kind of stuck out to me is you'll see guys pushing coverage all the time where a safety will say, I'm going to take this motion, man. You, as a corner, kind of cover me in center field or whatever. Trey White jammed on the brakes like he either didn't expect the call or it came really late. And that to me made it feel like a better call because at one level or another it wasn't unexpected. Trey White's been in this defense since the beginning. So you're not going to tell me he didn't know what he's supposed to do. For Trey White to have to react that way, I thought it was a pretty darn good play for Taylor Rapp.
Especially in the red zone, because one of the hardest things about pushing coverage in the red zone is that there's not a lot of space. So like if you push a call and the safety isn't able to rock with the wide receiver, well, the receiver has you out leveraged and it's toast. So the fact that he was able to sniff it out so quickly and tell Trey White, who didn't hear it right away and finally slammed the brakes like you just mentioned, that's a good heads up play about someone who has been in this defense, has been in the NFL for quite some time now, that has seen a bunch, that was able to pick up on that. So Taylor Rapp hasn't had the greatest of years. He hasn't been bad either. I think he's been steady, but that was an example of a player where you're like, hey, if you want to bring someone into the system week 9, week 10, they may not make that play because they haven't seen it from the Bills' perspective.
On the flip side, you got Dorian Strong, who got a few more reps because Sean McDermott said it wasn't about Trey White, but I think it probably was. You take 2 penalties early, you're going to probably see some time on the bench. I don't care who you are. Strong didn't get tested much in the passing game, but you liked him in the run game in this one.
Yeah, he was physical. His first play out there, I believe that they threw a screen pass to his direction, and he did a good job of shrinking it out and eventually forcing Alvin Kamara out of bounds. And then he made another play similar to that where he kept the ball inside of him and kept his contained later on in that drive. I think he's a player that has shown, especially dating back to that Ravens game as well, he ain't scared. He's willing to tackle, put his face in the fan. We just don't have much evidence that he can cover. I know he gave up the big play against the Ravens, that drag that ended up turning to like a 30-yard game. That was more so of a miscommunication, I would say. So for those who are clamoring to put Trey White on the bench and insert 43, you're going to have to see more from 43 in terms of coverage before you make the decision to put 27 on the bench.
And I don't even know if we're going to get enough out of him before Max Hairston's healthy to where he might be the guy in line ahead of Dorian Strong to get that time if Trey White is not living up to what the Bills need him to be. Further closer to the line, Joey Bosa had a really good finish to this game as a pass rusher. A number of pressures looked good, but that was only really the last 2 drives. In fact, the way I charted it, I had the Bills for 16 pressures in this game. Almost half of them were the last 2 drives where they were up by 2 scores. The rest of the game, the pass rush was okay. As a run defender, it stuck out to me on a few occasions how almost slow he looked covering the edge. Alvin Kamara is a great back, but he ain't 22, and he made Joey Bosa look like a guy that didn't belong in the league, at least against Kamara, as a run defender in this one.
Yeah, he didn't keep contained a few times, and I think you saw it live, at least from the press box. You saw his reaction when he was mad at himself that he got beat to the outside. It happened more than once, so that wasn't good to see. The Bills' offense, we know this, just isn't the Bills' defense, isn't some athletic unit. So at least a bunch of freaks out there. So they're going to have to really rely on their techniques and their keys to make sure that they're sound. You can't have one of your better players abandoning assignment, at least from my perspective, and to give up gash 10, 15-yard plays. But yes, you're hopeful that Joey Bosa, one of your best players, is providing more juice, like you just alluded to, but also doing your 111th, like Sean McDermott likes to always say.
Well, and the other side of this too is that in a couple weeks, 3 exact, he might not have to do that job because one of the things I thought about was that's where you put Michael Hoyt in. That's where you put 55 in the field, let him control first and second down, let him use that energy to be a guy who can really set the edge, and then you leave Joey Bosa to do what he has done well this year, and that's get after the quarterback on 3rd and long. But for a guy who's, I think, pretty respectable at minimum on 1st and 2nd down, it did stick out to me how much he had trouble in this game. On the other side of the line, Greg Rousseau has not had a great start to the year. And Bobby Babich on Monday said that last week the Bills challenged Greg Rousseau. And Carl, I got to admit, I was a little bothered by Bobby Babich using that terminology. And I get, look, Rousseau has not lived up to what you would expect. But this guy for the last 4 years has been a consistent improver, the most dependable lineman on the team. When the Bills had that terrible performance against the Bengals in the playoffs, Greg Rousseau was the only guy who played at the same level he did during the regular season. So for the Bills, 4 games into his 5th season, for a guy you just paid who's been pretty good, for that guy to need challenging, I thought it was something that bothered me because I didn't think a guy like that should need it. If you're year 2, if you're a new starter, I get it. But I don't know where this is coming from. The only thing I can land on is that at some level, he just got paid, and the Bills maybe are wondering if there's an issue with not having the same fire or the same motor as he did before.
Yeah, and also I don't want to dive too deep onto this because I don't know Greg Rousseau in terms of like his mental day to day, how he focuses up. But a lot of times the coaches kind of use us as a vessel to get to the players. Like they will use something in terms of those press conferences and those scrums to to relay a message saying like, hey, I told you once in the meeting room this your level isn't up to the standard. Maybe if I tell people outside of these walls, it'll be in that direction. I'm personally not the biggest fan of that because what we say in house stays in house. But I was also a little shocked that terminology, because challenge means like, hey, bud, like I don't think you're playing up to like there are other ways that you can say a player isn't playing up to standard outside of using the word challenge, which I'm right with you on that one. It did shock me a little bit as well. But maybe they just wanted to find another way to light a fire up under his behind and play better.
Yeah, I am in no way implying that Greg Rousseau has slacked off or done anything.
Right.
That's why I'm mad.
Yes.
Because that is a guy on this team that I would put near the bottom of the list of having a concern about effort. Now, look, the production has not been there. No one can argue that.
Yes.
You know, and maybe Bobby Babich, maybe he might, want to have, as the Bills say all the time, he might want to have that comment back, in terms of the word he's using. The point I'm making is that I think Greg Rousseau will figure it out because there is no one on that line, even Ed Oliver included, who has been more consistent as a producer. And in this game, hey, when they got challenged, a couple good pressures. The one play that stood out is he was the one who closed out that 2-point play. If it's not for Greg Rousseau, the Saints get that too, and maybe that game is different because it's not a 2-score lead late, it's a 1-score lead late. So me sitting here after watching Greg Rousseau, I think he's a guy that will figure it out, no matter if the Bills feel like they needed to challenge him. And, if I was Greg Rousseau, and he won't say this because he's a pretty humble guy, I almost would have been a little insulted to feel like that you need to challenge me after week 4. And again, I'm getting mad at something that maybe doesn't exist as poorly as we are laying it out here. But regardless, that was the word that Bobby Babich used, and I wanted to point it out, kind of defending Greg Rousseau. Anything else on that from you or no?
No, I think that's a fair point. When I heard it too, I was like, I've been that player. And you telling the people outside this family that you trying to get me amped up, that's kind of wild.
All right, let's move on to the Patriots here just for a couple minutes. It's going to be an interesting test. This is a very much a discover game because New England's won 2 games, but they've beaten the Dolphins, who are 1-3 and not very good, and they've beaten the Carolina Panthers, who are 1-3 and even worse. But they were real impressive knocking off Carolina last week, and they will present a test that the Bills and most of the league's teams in this league don't present too often.
Yeah, I want to once again be respectful to the Bills' opponents they face so far, but Drake May will be probably a top 4 or 5 passer on their schedule in terms of how he can access all areas of the field. Sure, Jalen Hurts has the Philadelphia Eagles offense, but he's very limited in how he attacks a defense, right? He's got the deep ball, he got the check down, and with his legs. I think Drake May is a super talented passer, and it bears out with a lot of the analytics. I believe on a down-to-down basis, his success rate was basically Thad Brown has beautifully laid out before. He is number 1 in the NFL at that right now as a passer. So he's doing a good job of moving the chains despite not really having superb weapons around him. The running game is bleh. So I think that this is going to be a challenge that the Bills defense is going to have to take on. Listen, we've kind of beat it around the bush and said like, hey, we don't know how we're going to judge this Bills defense until they play someone with the pulse. I think that this will be a week where we can say, okay, I'm not saying Drake May is Patrick Mahomes or an elite guy, but he will at least make these guys have to use their hamstrings a little bit more often than they did last week, where Spencer Rattler's checking it down every single play.
To be fair, Spencer Rattler was a hamstring tester for sure when he started to scramble. There were
Right.
a couple players who might have been, pulling at the old back of the leg after. I got a little twinge there. That's why I didn't make that play. But I'm with you on Drake May and what he can do. I'm still concerned about the rest of the Patriots offense.
Yes,
I mean, they spent a top pick on an offensive lineman for a reason. Stephon Diggs is the number 1 receiver there. for a reason. But yeah, as a quarterback, look, if the Bills can't get pressure, and like we said in this one against the Saints, the pressure wasn't there until it was easy, until it was pin your ears back time for the most part. So if Drake May gets to sit back there and survey a field, I don't care who his receivers are, I think it will be a pretty unique test for the Bills this week.
Just one last thing on Drake May I will mention. He is 4th right now in EPA per play per drop back, but he's been sacked 13 times, and his pressure rate is one of the highest in the National Football League. So basically, if you want to know how the Bills slow him down, get after him, put him on his behind so the secondary doesn't have to get tested as much. That is super fascinating. I'm going to see how that front 4 for the Bills attacks that Patriots offensive line.
The funny thing about that is that if he's number 4 in EPA and he gets sacked a lot, doesn't that mean that the plays he doesn't get sacked are really, really good, right, basically?
Yeah, that's exactly what that means.
All right, we're gonna find out for sure on Sunday night. Thanks for watching, as always. For Carl Jones, I'm Thad Brown. You can always see Let's Talk Ball, the BKL Nightly Tuesday edition on YouTube and on Spotify. BKL Nightly is back tomorrow, getting you ready for Week 5 against the Patriots. For Carl, I'm Thad. Thanks for watching.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.